In 2006, Mercedes-Benz introduced the command radio over most fiber optic into the ML, GL, and R. At the time, this radio was state-of-the-art. However, by today's standards, it lacks features that a customer would really desire in a vehicle of this caliber. This radio does not have navigation, Bluetooth, or satellite radio. In addition, you can't add features like Android Auto or Apple CarPlay that are available in aftermarket units. Due to the cost of this unit being approximately $4,500, a replacement would probably be in order versus fixing and replacing the factory radio. This radio is a prime example. The eject mechanism doesn't work, the navigation drive has failed, and the face of the radio you have to manually put back up. The loading mechanism has failed. Let's get started by qualifying your vehicle for compatibility with the MBHUR V2. First, set the radio on an AM/FM station or a in-CD. We need to verify whether or not this vehicle has a fiber optic amplifier. Lift up the back seat, and you're going to be looking for any fiber optic equipment. Usually there's up to 4 different pieces located in the well. Identify the fiber optic connector with audio playing, and remove the connector. If audio goes out, you have a compatible vehicle. Some vehicles do not have accessories in this location. To perform the same test, remove the head unit in the next steps, and remove the fiber optic at the head. To remove the head unit, you're going to pry from the bottom, pulling straight backward on the factory HVAC panel, and then you're going to remove the plugs. Once the plugs are removed and the HVAC panel has been set aside, you're going to identify 2 T20 Torx screws and remove them. Then, taking a tool, pry straight down on the retaining fasteners that hold the factory radio in place. After that, the radio literally pulls out. NAV-TV does offer a very good selection of German-made, vehicle-specific kits to house your aftermarket radio. Once the radio is mounted into the kit, it's time for the wiring. The first step in the installation is in the vehicle. The harness that I have in my hand is what you'll find behind the factory radio. You do have to remove the fiber optic from this connection. To remove it, there is a retaining clip on the left side of it. You're going to hold it back, and you're going to remove the connector. Next, you're going to identify the fiber optic cap included with the kit and insert it onto the vehicle's factory fiber optic connector in the dash. Grabbing the extension harness, which is included in the kit, you're now going to plug this in to the factory wiring. The other end is going to plug into the MBHUR V2 unit. The MBHUR comes with a dust cover. This has to be removed before installation. Once it's removed, plug the fiber optic cable into the unit. The next step is going to require the instructions from your aftermarket head unit. We need to identify the wires that we're going to use. In most applications, you'll have ground, constant power, accessory power, illumination, amplifier turn-on, a reverse trigger input if adding an aftermarket backup camera, and even a parking brake wire. To make the installation easy, the MBHUR actually generates signals from your car that are necessary to hook up your radio. These connections should be made using either butt connectors or solder with heat shrink. The MBHUR will actually generate illumination, accessory, and other hard-to-find triggers that reduce installation time, making installation easy. Please note that there'll be some wires that you're not using. In this case, these are speaker wires. Additionally, an antenna turn-on. These are not being used. Any wires that you don't use, make sure that you insulate the ends with electrical tape to avoid them shorting out within the vehicle. Once your power connections have been completed, it's time to plug in the MBHUR and move on to the next step, which is wiring in the infrared. To make sure that your steering wheel controls still function, the infrared connection has to be made. In some cases, the unit will use the 3.5mm, and what you would do with these is take the red wire and you connect it to the infrared output of the MBHUR. In other cases, like in Kenwood, it's simply a wire-to-wire connection. When using a 3.5mm, make sure that the bare wire is attached to ground. After the hard wire connections have been made, simply take the RCA units from the MBHUR and plug them in to the front and rear outputs of the aftermarket radio. After that, the entire unit can be installed into the vehicle. Before the unit can be used, it has to go through a setup process, which is done through the OEM cluster and steering wheel controls. The first step after installing the aftermarket radio is to turn on the ignition and verify that the radio comes on and that you have various functions operational and obviously that you hear sound. Once you verify that the radio is functional and that you hear sound, it's time to enter the setup process. While looking at the vehicle's instrument cluster, the first step is to make sure that what you're seeing is the audio menu. Use the page up and down buttons on the steering wheel control until you enter the audio menu. And this is the audio menu. Once you see NAV-TV HU audio on the cluster, we're going to enter the programming by holding down the phone hang-up button until you start seeing a countdown. Continue to hold through this process until it enters into the setup menu. Once in the settings menu, you can release the phone hang-up button. Now, you're going to be displaying various options for setup. For example, gain, bass, treble. Using the plus and minus, you can advance the setting, for example, from gain to treble. Once in the setting, use the arrow up and down buttons to either increase or decrease. You can change the fade, the balance. You can even turn on and off Logic 7 using the MBHUR setup process. Once your audio settings are completed, we move on to the infrared. Select the radio brand that you've installed in the vehicle. Once that brand is selected, press the hang-up button momentarily to exit the settings menu. After exiting the setup process, please check your radio for complete functionality, including infrared commands with the steering wheel and tonality of the system. If any fine adjustments need to be made, you can always re-enter the setup menu and make adjustments to your volume level, to the bass, the treble settings, or even to change the radio type to ensure that your steering wheel controls are working with your aftermarket radio.